The Week 14 NFL DFS main slate has 13 games on it. And that may seem fun because it means we've got all these awesome offenses like the Packers, we've got the Chiefs, we've got the Broncos. We've got so many fun options available to us, but it also means we got to choose. And that is a lot less fun than looking at all of these. What we're going to do today is break down how we're prioritizing all these awesome offenses, all these awesome players on this slate, and try to decide which games we want to stack and how we want to play the Week 14 main slate. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gadula. He is the managing editor for numberFire.com. Brandon, you got a lot to sort through on this slate. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm a little confused, though, because I don't know if you meant...
It was a joke.
Because, sometimes I start to say, like, oh, yeah, whenever we're doing, like, a golf event, I'm like, oh, we got all these studs here. I'm like, Justin Thomas, Dustin Johnson, then I blank on who else is there, and I throw out some name that doesn't really fit. Yeah. And I didn't know if that was on purpose or if it was a joke. But
well, I will say that Denver is only third from the bottom in projected offensive efficiency for this week. Does that float your boat at all? So that'd be like
26, so they're 24th.
24th in projected offensive efficiency. What could go wrong?
Yeah, it's wild that there are 26 teams. I think I had to cut off a game or two. To be fair, the Washington-San Francisco game,
it cuts itself off.
Those teams weren't ready by the time I was really taking notes, and then I was like, I'm just going to gloss over that one. If I get beat out of 13 games because that's the game, I deserve this, but I feel pretty good that that's not the game this week.
Yeah, but we do have to sort between the Chiefs. We have the Packers. We have the Seahawks against the Jets, which is an intriguing spot. The Tennessee Titans are facing the Jaguars in shootout machine Mike Lennon. So it's a tough slate, and we're going to break things down here, go through trends we are noticing, some injuries to note, some changes at quarterback, of course, as well, and also go through our picks at each position. But first, the Week 14 FanDuel Podcast Network Listener League is posted. As always, it's a $5 entry with 3 entries max, and it is rake-free. That means FanDuel makes nothing off of this contest. All the entry fees go right back to you, the listeners. To enter, go to FanDuel.com/league/listener league. That's FanDuel.com/league/listener league. You can also get a link to it in the podcast post up on numberFire.com for the Week 13 recap or this Week 14 preview. Eligibility restrictions apply. And to me, looking at this Week 14 main slate, the big questions for me are, which of the studs we prioritize? Not a question, but I think an edict here is that we need upside at quarterback again. Last week we talked about how you said, I think verbatim on the podcast, there may not be a quarterback who scores 30 FanDuel points, and there was only one for the entire slate. So that's not going to be the case this week. We need to get 30 points effectively out of our quarterback. So to me, it's trying to find upside at quarterback and literally go through and rank the studs for me. What are the big keys for you on this slate?
Yeah, that's one of them. It's been a new sort of, in years past, I never felt like we had to worry about quarterback that much.
Yeah.
It's very different right now. But I think that we have, again, the conversation of the stud running backs because we have 3 potential options with Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey. If he plays, he was trending toward being a guarantee to play. And then I guess tweaked his thigh in like a personal workout. So I don't know about that.
I don't want to know what happened there. I desperately do not want to know the details.
and then Derrick Henry. So we have 3 backs who can, as we would put it, sort of break the slate. But we also have, if you go through a receiver, take your pick, really, between Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill. I won't read all of them, but it's loaded this week at receiver. So I'm sitting here thinking, what do I want to do more often? Is it build around the stud running backs or the stud receivers? Historically, on this podcast, we pay up at running back. However, I think this week might lend itself to a little bit more balance in that sense, where I'm not necessarily thinking about only the studs and maybe taking advantage of the 7,000 range at receiver. So I'm getting a stud running back and then potentially 2 of those mid-range receivers, which is not usually how my mind works, but I think that's pretty intriguing based on how this slate rolls and how these games are for, the 7,000 receivers specifically in that Minnesota-Tampa Bay game.
Well, I think the other thing too is that it's the other part of it too is I am more willing to sacrifice at running back because of Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill. So for me, it's less about the mid-range at wide receiver and it's more about the upside and the top two guys, and Devontae and Tyreek Hill, because like those two guys are effectively running backs, right? Like from a safety perspective and an upside perspective. Like I think there aren't many wide receivers we can view as having a comparable range of outcomes from a median projection and upside projection on FanDuel to running backs. But I think that Devontae and Tyreek Hill kind of have that because they have really tremendous floors right now, and they can go for 40 FanDuel points. So I think that to me is the bigger focus, is Devontae and Tyreek Hill maybe sacrificing shares of Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry in order to get more of them. I can fill out lineups with Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Derrick Henry. I know that. I made sure I could do that before, and they're not bad lineups. But like, I think for me, the main focus is Devontae and Tyreek. I love the 7,000 range. I think that, Evans, Thielen, Jefferson, they're awesome. Julio. But I also think that I want to make sure I get a lot of Tyreek and Devontae, which is not always a focus for me on FanDuel.
Yeah, and I definitely understand that. And I'm with you. It's really hard to knock either of those two guys. I mean, Hill's matchups more difficult, but his weighted target numbers, I mean, just his sheer target numbers lately have been incredible. But considering that he gets downfield work like he does, his air yards numbers, it's just insane. But along with that, I'm going to do this again, but Travis Kelce, there is opportunity cost. That's the reason that we spend up at these positions, trying to get access to these sort of unmatchable floors. But Travis Kelce does kind of have an unmatchable ceiling, I should say. Travis Kelce does kind of have that for me again this week. And I think that with Darren Waller back on the slate, he might be kind of an afterthought.
I don't think it'll be an afterthought. I think people understand
from where he should be.
I think that any amount of popularity is probably going to be lower than it should be with Travis Kelce.
Right.
Just because, like, I agree. I mean, he's like, it's so hard not to get there. But again, he's $8,200. I don't care about the salary because he's a wide receiver, like, and he fills tight end. But like, that does force you to deviate elsewhere. I'm just saying this week I am willing to do that. Whereas, like, I think we need to. Like, usually, like you said, our focus is spending all the salary we can at running back and scrambling elsewhere. I think this week I'm more willing to make some consolations. Thankfully, we have some value plays we can turn to at running back, who we'll talk about throughout the podcast for today. And I think it's a pretty fun slate with the way things shape up. Couple different roster constructions you can use, and we'll be talking about those throughout. Let's start things off here with the news and injuries. Not an injury here, but Jalen Hurts will start for the Eagles this week in place of Carson Wentz. He'll be facing Taysom Hill, as it sounds like Drew Brees will need another week to ramp things up here. So how are you viewing this Eagles offense with Jalen Hurts at the helm?
Not very differently, honestly. And the thing that helps me not get that concerned is the market shares here for this team just don't really jump out. I don't feel like there's even one pass catcher necessarily that I would want to have exposure to realistically. I was trying to figure out ways to bring back some sort of like a Taysom Hill, Michael Thomas stack, but I'm not really there, and I'm out on Miles Sanders as well.
I mean, that game's going to be bad. Like, from a DFS perspective, there's not going to be enough points for me to be interested really in either side here. So it's not as much of a cross-off as the Washington-San Francisco game, but it's close. Just because, like, Taysom and Thomas are objectively fine. It's more like it's hard to prioritize them over Mike Evans, Julio, Thielen, Jefferson. So I think that's the issue for me. I also think that it does amp up the allure in spending up for the Saints defense at $4,900. Jalen Hurts is a very talented player, but he, like Carson Wentz, loves to take sacks. And this Saints defense is playing really well right now. This offensive line is a disaster, and that's not going to mesh well with the weaknesses in Hurts' game. So I do think that there is some appeal in spending up for the Saints. I will say that the low salary defense this week are amazing, but I will have some Saints defense as a result of this. The Panthers have placed DJ Moore on the COVID-19 list. He reportedly tested positive, which would hold him out this week. Curtis Samuel is also on the COVID-19 list, though that's reportedly because he is a close contact to Moore rather than someone who tested positive himself. So if he tests negative, he'll be able to play. So let's assume that Samuel plays and DJ Moore sits. How would you view the pass catchers against a Denver team that is missing a lot of pieces in the secondary here?
We've been on Curtis Samuel for a while now, and if there's no DJ Moore, I would feel even better. I mean, he just gets really creative usage. We'll get red zone work, and if you take DJ Moore out of that equation, I would really have interest in Curtis Samuel at 5,900. But the reason for that is because DJ Moore is a really talented player, but they still have Robbie Anderson to stretch the field and take attention away and kind of, it's not the same. It's not a similar situation where you're taking Kenny Golladay off the field and there's not a whole lot else. Right. So I think Robbie Anderson is also intriguing at 6,500. But if for some reason Samuel doesn't play and DJ Moore doesn't play, Robbie Anderson might have volume, but that offense might just be a little bit too inefficient for me.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that at some point there's a tipping point you get to. We'll talk about Christian McCaffrey and his injury later on, but there is a tipping point. I think that if it's just one of those guys missing, they're probably okay. But like you said, if it's two, that's where we start to lower the entire offense. Daniel Jones is trending toward playing this week after missing week 13 with a hamstring injury. They're facing the Cardinals in New York. So are you in on the Giants now with Danny Dimes back at the helm?
Yeah, it's weird that we are hoping, I was just kind of waiting for Daniel Jones despite being pretty bad this year in terms of efficiency. The offense is just significantly better with him at least, and there are some players, some pass catchers who I have interest in, specifically Evan Ingram, who I've liked every week, and it seems like you are now in on him with his role improving.
Yep. His role changed. I mean, he's a different player right now than he was before because he's getting downfield targets and he's not playing the Jason Witten role. And that was the reason that I could not use him. I could not justify using him. Now I can very easily. Jones can complete deep passes. So it's not even empty volume down the field for Evan Ingram. So I think that's alluring at $5,700. I think Evan Ingram is one of my favorite tight end plays in the slate. Not as alluring as Kelsey, obviously, but definitely someone I'm going to use. John Gruden said that Josh Jacobs was likely to miss another game this week due to his ankle injury. They're facing the Colts in Las Vegas. We kind of have more data on Devontae Booker now. It's not all that flattering. So does he tempt you at all in this spot?
Not really. And it's not just because of what happened last week, but there are so many other options. And I don't really see Booker being someone I regret not using. That's kind of the threshold at this point. 13 games, it's going to take a huge outing for me to regret that, even though the salary is nice. There are some other viable lower salaried backs who I much prefer. They're
actually a decent number, so I don't feel the need to force it here. His role was just underwhelming last week. I thought he'd get the passing game work. Jalen Richard came back and got that, so I don't really feel the need to go there again. DeAndre Swift is able to get in a limited session Wednesday while still working back from his illness. Kenny Golladay, though, missed another practice on Wednesday. We'll talk about the Lions in the trends section. Washington will likely be without Antonio Gibson Sunday after he hurt his toe Monday night. That makes J.D. McKissic and Peyton Barber the lead backs here. McKissic is $5,300. I know that you've had interest in him in the past. Does he do anything for you here?
Probably not enough, honestly. The Washington's implied team total is 20 points. If it were just J.D. McKissic, I would have interest, but Peyton Barber is probably going to get the goal line work. Right. A lot of the rushing. McKissic will just get pass game work. So if you could roll them up into one player, sure. But on a team with those expectations, I can't really handle a split backfield.
Yeah. Last week with Gibson getting hurt pretty early, McKissic, 25 adjusted opportunities, but only 78 yards. Basically, he was Zeke, and I don't want to use Zeke. That's weird. But 25% red zone share, I don't know. I don't feel the need to go there personally. It's just there's not enough upside. Denzel Mims is now at the Jets as he deals with a family emergency. That means he could be taken out of the COVID-19 protocols and be required to quarantine upon returning or have 5 negative tests. that would likely take him out of action on Sunday. We don't have full word on this yet, but we'll talk about the Seahawks side later. But if Mims sits, would you be in on either Brashad Perriman or Jamison Crowder?
I mean, so losing Mims would be problematic because he's very good and stretches the field, but so can Brashad Perriman. So I would imagine Brashad Perriman gets as many downfield targets as he can handle. It might help Jamison Crowder get down the field a little bit more. Crowder's he's 6,600.
Crowder is?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
How did I not see him scrolling through I mean, I know he had the 2 touchdown game, but
is he $1,000 over salary? Like, is that outrageous?
How have I? Because I've been looking at the 6,000 range for receivers.
The
for
6,000 range sucks. It's terrible.
And like, there's nobody who jumps out. I don't even see his name.
Well, it's probably because like your brain is like, no.
Yeah.
Your brain like survival instincts is like, I'm going to black this out from Brandon so he doesn't see it. Like, not that you'd be tempted anyway, but like your brain is just trying to help you, you know?
Yeah. Tyler Boyd's 67.
That's this is why the 6,000 range sucks.
I've been staring at the 6,000 range, and I didn't even know that those two guys.
I didn't know the Bengals were on this slate.
Yeah,
like,
basically,
they might as well not be. But like, my goodness. Okay, so I think that if I were to use either, it'd obviously be Perriman. But like,
yeah,
when they've had only 2 of these guys healthy throughout this year, the offense has been bad. And, like, that matters. So I feel like even Perriman would be hard to get to. Like, I'd rather go DJ Chark at 59 or I'd rather go Kiki Cutie at 56.
Yeah,
I can use players who have good quarterbacks. I don't know why I included DJ Chark in that. But, like, I can go to Kiki Cutie, who has a disgustingly good quarterback, as opposed to Brashad Perriman.
I'm in on, yeah, sure.
I know. I'm finally in on Cutie. It again, I'll change my tune when I get more data. The data was very good. So I've changed my tune drastically. Yeah. Let's move now to our trends discussion here for week number 14, and starting off with one of the fun games on this slate. There are a lot of games that I am very okay stacking, and one that's near the top of the list, it could be number 1, it's at least in that discussion, is the Packers against the Lions. And part of the reason that I am in on this game is that I think the Lions offense is interesting given what they did last week. They're back at home now, facing a Packers defense that has good players, but is not like a fearsome unit. Your trend is looking at the Lions offense in week 13. What do you see there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I both have been tracking the Lions efficiency like week to week pretty closely because they've been a very different offense with and without Kenny Golladay, which something we kind of allude to a lot. For example, we expected the offensive efficiency for the Texans last week to be worse with Will Fuller out, but I mean, good players can still kind of do some things, and we finally started to see Matthew Stafford be Matthew Stafford under a new coach. After their Thanksgiving loss, the team fired head coach Matt Patricia. The game after that happened, Matthew Stafford had 402 passing yards and 3 touchdowns against the top 8 adjusted pass defense based on numberFire's metrics. It was comeback mode, and we can't copy and paste that line, but there's a lot of good data in what we saw last week. Stafford threw for 551 air yards. That was the most of any quarterback in a game this season. Good for an average target depth of 13.1 yards downfield. His downfield attempt rate was 31%. His passing net expected points per dropback number was 0.37, which was his 3rd best game of the season. The NFL average this year is 0.14, so he's about 3 times the NFL average in efficiency there. Again, yes, they were trying to come back, but he was still efficient, and that's the differentiator. We've seen quarterbacks pile up yardage and some maybe fluky touchdowns in comeback mode, but he was still efficient in this entire game. So I think that there are reasons to be in on Matthew Stafford. His season best from a passing net expected points per dropback standpoint came 4 games ago, so he's had 2 of his best games over the past 4 weeks, and he got very different usage last week. Prior to this game, he was about league average in ADOT at 7.9 yards downfield, below average in downfield rate by about a percentage point. He doubled that in week 13, so he's trending up in a big way. And there's more underlying data to for this offense. Their pace last week was 26.3 seconds per play on passes and rushes when their win probability was between 20 and 80%. The Cardinals lead the NFL at that same number, so they were really fast last week. Their pass rate was about 64% in these like sort of context-adjusted situations. That would rank 6th on the full season. So their full season rate, they played about 2.2 seconds faster last week. They're about 6.5 percentage points higher in pass rate. So, like, again, there's just a lot to like about this offense, I think, if they're going to play like they did last week. Whether they get Kenny Golladay back or not would be a huge differentiation, but Stafford has been better without Kenny Golladay since like week 7. He really struggled early on, but in 6 games without Kenny Golladay, but with Danny Amendola, Marvin Jones leads the team with a 20% target share, which is not great. That's usually kind of too low for me to feel very excited about a wide receiver 1 for a team, but that's 7.8 targets per game. When you wait for them, for the fact that he gets 2.3 downfield targets per game, he gets red zone work. It's more equivalent to like 10.3 targets per game. His efficiency is above the NFL average on a per target basis. So things are looking up for Marv. The issue is he could draw Jair Alexander, so might need to pump the brakes there a little bit. But TJ Hawkinson has a 17% target share in this sample, gets some downfield work, some red zone work. Danny Amendola has 15% of the targets. Surprisingly has some downfield targets on those, but did run just 55% of the routes last week. And after the team waived Marvin Hall, Mohamed Sadu ran 61% of the routes last week. Quintez Cephas, Kerryon Johnson at 46%. So, like, possibly there's some value here if we want to really stack up this game and get a little bit weird. But again, getting DeAndre Swift, getting Kenny Golladay back would help a ton for this offense. But I think there's a lot to like. So how does this team look for you? Do you feel confident in stacking the other side of this game? Because I know you're in on the Packers.
Yeah.
Like I was not saying. Do you feel confident in the Lions or not necessarily?
Confident enough. I think that one reason to be a little bit lower on this game is like the other game. Like, I think to me, this slate kind of comes down to comparing the Chiefs and the Packers. I feel better about the Dolphins keeping pace with the Chiefs than the Lions keeping pace with the Packers. However, like we talked about last week, like even when Aaron Rodgers in situations where the other team doesn't do a whole lot, he can still come through as he did in that game against Philly. I know they kind of rallied late, but like that game was over pretty fast, like effectively. So I think that Rodgers is still going to be one of the top quarterbacks in the slate. I think that Devontae is obviously an amazing option. Aaron Jones would benefit if this offense is lively, and I think they can. It's not just that like the data said that, but there's also the narrative of the new coach, but also Darrell Bevell said verbatim, or not verbatim, I'm kidding. Like paraphrasing, literally the opposite of verbatim. He said they wanted to play up tempo, and they did. Like, how much more data do we need to say that this is good? And I don't need much personally. So I think that it's potentially okay. This is the way I'm going to view this. I think that if you are giving me one lineup and like my life is on the line, I need to make sure I cash in like a 50-50 or whatever. I'm going the Packers as my preferred team. I think I prefer the Dolphins the Chiefs a little bit for tournaments because I think they should be a bit more overlooked. I think that I feel better about the Dolphins keeping pace. The matchup may scare people away. So I would pick the Chiefs over the Packers, but I feel good enough about the Lions offense to feel good about the Packers too.
Yeah, I mean that's basically what my trends have been lately. Like this season can we like one team? Right. Is this other team going to ruin the game?
Right.
And I don't really see that with the Lions. I mean, they might not. I'm not saying that they will cover the spread, that they'll keep it necessarily close, but we want to make sure that this is not a spot where we are seeing like Aaron Jones not really involved in the fourth quarter, that they're not throwing the ball in the fourth quarter at all. So I think that I've seen enough from the Lions here, and they have some usable pieces. I think I would be highest on, assuming no Golladay and Swift, I'd be highest on TJ Hawkinson. A, because he fills tight end, but B, he's second at tight end in 50-yard games this year. He's only 3 behind Travis Kelce, who's like way out ahead of everybody else. Yeah. So
I think that I'd agree with Hawkinson being first. Where would you be on DeAndre Swift if he plays? And let's assume for the sake of discussion, he gets into full practice on Friday. Like, I think that's kind of a key for me is getting in a full practice Friday.
Yeah.
Swift gets a good matchup. We know he's a dynamic player, but he's also coming off a multi-week absence that has entailed both a concussion and an illness. Where would you be on Swift if he plays?
I think at this point, when Swift returns, I'd have to feel pretty confident that he's ready to return because like they don't need to rush him back at this point. They haven't rushed him back or anything. So I would feel good with him. He wouldn't be my favorite play below 7,000 at running back, but I think I'm probably going to wind up with a fairly tight core of running backs overall. He would be one of them.
So we're putting Montgomery above him, right?
Yes.
Jonathan Taylor or DeAndre Swift, assuming again a full practice on Friday.
I'd probably lean Swift.
Okay, I'd probably go Taylor there, but I think that like they're in the same tier to me.
Yeah, Swift could play like 70% of snaps if he's a full go.
Well, like if DeAndre Swift, if you guaranteed me that he would have the same role he had before the concussion, he would be a core play for me. I think that the odds that he doesn't have that are a little bit too high for me, just because of the ramping him back up and stuff like that. So that's why I'm a little bit more hesitant. And Taylor, like, he has a weirdly good floor despite his bad role, like weirdly good.
I don't know if we're going to talk about him much at all. So
I haven't been player picks. Don't worry. Sorry. I know that's probably shocking to you, but no, he isn't my player picks.
Do you know who I was about to say?
Oh, sorry. Oh, I thought you were going to ask about Jonathan Taylor.
No, I said I don't think we're going to talk about him.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Taylor still. Okay, who?
Kenyon Drake or DeAndre Swift?
Probably Swift. Because, like, the one thing... I mean, the Giants' defense as a whole has played well recently, but they're pretty good against the rush even when they weren't as good. So I feel like I would probably go with DeAndre Swift there. I think that Drake is at least interesting, but I'd probably go like Taylor, Swift, Drake in that order.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, he's at least in the conversation. He just feels like I haven't really looked at him enough. Which is hard. I mean, you got 13 games. I've broken down every game. I just haven't given that much thought to Kenyon Drake. But yeah,
Drake's most relevant sample for me is his full games this year. He's at 21 adjusted opportunities per game, 82 yards per game, 36% red zone roll. His red zone usage has been really, really good since he came back from injury. But like Kyler being banged up is pretty legit concern.
Yeah.
So let's move to my first trend here and talk about the Chargers, because on paper, the Chargers-Falcons game looks pretty good. It's a tight spread and a high total, which is what we want here. But the Chargers offense has been pretty rough recently. And as someone who bet the over on 24 team points for them last week, feeling a little scarred. It's worth digging in to see if we might be sniffing down a bad path here. And over the past 4 games, Justin Herbert is at negative 0.01 passing net expected points per dropback, just 6 total touchdowns compared to 4 picks. And a lot of that was the Patriots game, but he also had below average efficiency in one other. He was dead average in another. And it's worth noting that those actually were in some pretty tough spots. The 3 average or bad games came against teams ranked 2nd, 9th, and 21st in schedule-adjusted pass defense. When he faced the 31st ranked Jets, he did really well. And the Falcons have been a lot better recently on defense, and that's worth noting here. They're up to 26 against the pass, but this still seems like a spot where the Chargers should be able to move the ball, and I'd expect the Falcons to do the same on the other side. So concerning that the Chargers have had a downtick, but I think I'm still in here. That puts me really high on Austin Eckler. Again, what could go wrong? He's still $7,500, averaging 122 yards per game and 32.5 adjusted opportunities per game. With Justin Herbert, that is a core play. Again, I know it burned me last week, but whatever. When have I learned from my mistakes previously? Some of the other guys may be a bit tougher sells. Herbert is in play at $8,300, but that's just $600 less than Patrick Mahomes, $800 less than Aaron Rodgers, $200 more than Kyler Murray. I like Tom Brady a lot. Keenan Allen has 23% of the overall targets and 40% of the deep targets in games with Eckler, Herbert, and Mike Williams. But he's only a $500 discount from Tyreek Hill, and he's $1,100 less than Devontae Adams. So
that's such a big numbers.
I mean, they're.
I understand, but
yeah, you know what I mean.
Yes, but
yeah. Like, if the equation is Keenan Allen and DJ Chark, or Nelson Aguilar and Tyreek Hill, I'm taking Aguilar and Hill every time. Like, that's why, to me, $600 is not that much.
Okay.
So that's what I mean. But you're right. You're right to point out that's not negligible.
I understand where you're coming from, but
you're right. You're right.
I don't want to make it sound like it's.
You're right. But as like a result of this, I kind of think that Hunter Henry's intriguing at $5,600. He's close to some desirable options like Evan Engram, but I think that Henry does grade out decently well here. So I think that I'm comfortable using the Chargers guys, especially Eckler, and I'll run it back here with Julio Jones, who is undersalaried. Like a Julio Eckler game stack is amazing and way undersalaried to me, but it's hard to get as jazzed about the Chargers relative to Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, et cetera, et cetera. So how are you viewing this Chargers team relative to others in Week 14?
I think I'm way higher on them than you are. Based on your whole trend there. We just don't really get to see them play weaker pass defenses hardly ever. It's just kind of how their schedule breaks. It's a tough division for the most part, but like we've seen 3 games where Herbert has played bottom 10 adjusted pass defenses based on numberFire's metrics. He's averaging 29.9 FanDuel points per game, 346 passing yards, 2.7 touchdowns. His efficiency is 0.37 passing net expected points per dropback. I believe Patrick Mahomes leads the league at 0.41 right now. He can throw it deep. We know effectively where the ball is going. I like this game a lot. They're not going to be able to run the ball very much, so I think that this is a really good bounce back spot. And yes, there are better options, but I don't think that necessarily excludes Herbert coming off a bad game at a salary that is, like you said, close to some of the stud we have a lot of stud quarterbacks, quote unquote, but it's close to Mahomes. It's above Brady. It's above Deshaun. It's above Kyler, Tannehill, depending on how you view him against the Jaguars. So I think that this is more of a differentiation play, and I think the process is there. So I sound a lot less concerned than you do.
It's not that I'm concerned. It's more so that I am prioritizing other things. So, like, Justin Herbert's probably my top 5 at quarterback, but I could also see myself only using 4 quarterbacks this week. Like, I think Mahomes, Brady, Rodgers. Who is the 5th? Oh, my goodness. Mahomes, Brady, Rodgers. Wait. Oh, my goodness. I am blanking so hard. Like, Mahomes, Brady, Rodgers, Tannehill. I think that Tannehill, Herbert are kind of the same, but I prefer pretty easily Mahomes, Brady, and Rodgers. I'll just keep saying it over and over, and eventually
Who are the 3, by the way?
Mahomes, Brady, Rodgers. I think that then Tannehill and Herbert are in like a steel cage death match for 4th place.
Right,
basically.
But I mean, yeah.
So, like, I'm not low on them. I'm just, I think realistically, he might wind up being my 4th or 5th quarterback, and it's possible I don't get to that many quarterbacks this week.
That's fine, and I think that this is an okay week. Weirdly, with a lot of options to kind of concentrate your exposure, because you want to play some Rodgers, maybe some Russ, because we know what Russ can do on the high end, even though there are a lot of concerns there. You want to have some Mahomes, you want to have some of everybody, but like, let's say you are trying to make it simple, 100 lineups, and you play 10 of each quarterback. You're not necessarily benefiting if you do have Aaron Rodgers lineups and he puts up 35. You're going to be roughly in line with the field, if not below, on Rodgers. So it's important to think about what your goals are. If you're building one lineup, Herbert's not necessarily the guy, but if you're building 150, I think that he is in play because that game is pretty stackable. We know if that game goes off, it's probably going to be through Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, possibly Hunter Henry, and then on the other side, it's going to be Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. So I think that has a lot of appeal to me as a tournament play.
So where do you rank this game for stacking? I know we're going to talk. Well, actually, let's wait. Let's talk about Chiefs Dolphins first.
Okay.
And then we'll come back to that. So you go through your second trend, then we'll rank the stacks.
What is my second trend?
So Dolphins with Tua.
Tua. Okay, yeah. Anytime the Chiefs are on the main slate, we have to get excited. It feels like they hardly ever are. So, I like to kind of figure out what I'm doing with the Chiefs any week. And like you said, it's kind of between the Chiefs and Packers as like the number 1 offense. But I think that both of those teams have some question marks about the other side of the ball. Again, we feel pretty good about the Lions. They're not necessarily the most stackable, but that game should be fine enough for the Packers. So I wanted to dig in and see, the other side of the game for the Chiefs. Looking at the Dolphins with Tua, I just want to make sure that we can bring it back or feel like the Chiefs will keep their foot on the pedal, which they kind of have been doing regardless. So that eases me a little bit. But I'm digging into this offense with Tua. He's now at 0.14 passing net expected points per dropback, which is exactly the NFL average. His passing success rate is 51.4%, which is about 2.5 points higher than the NFL average. So that's a start. His ADOT, his downfield attempt rate, roughly in line with the NFL average. So his full sample has been about an average quarterback. I'll circle back to him in a second, but in situations where their pre-snap win probability was between 20 and 80%, they pass at a 58.6% clip in games started by Tua, which would rank them 19th on the full season. So it's definitely not bad, but it's not great. They are, however, 27th in seconds per play on passes and rushes in that split. So kind of like to slow it down. That's part of the issue with this team under Tua. Like, he's been, again, average overall, but they don't run a lot of plays, and I think they prefer that. But if you look at him closer, he's been really, really up and down in his 5 starts. Remember the number 0.14, because that's the currently, and has been for most of the season, the league average for passing net expected points per drop back for a quarterback this season. So 0.14. His 5 starts have yielded negative 0.28, positive 0.34, positive 0.38, negative 0.24, and positive 0.30. So 3 pretty elite games where he's been at least twice the NFL average in efficiency, 2 really bad games. Has not had a game where he's been close. In his 2 bad games, he took 9 total sacks. Now, the Chiefs are 12th in adjusted pass defense based on numberFire's metrics. His 2 bad games have come against top 6 adjusted pass defenses. So top 12 is not top 6, but there are some concerns there that maybe he struggles against tougher opponents. The Chiefs are just average in pressure rate generated according to Pro Football Reference. So this isn't about like, can I play Tua? Because I don't think that's a good play with so many other quarterbacks. But it's, does this game stay close? Does Tyreek Hill need 15 targets, or does this game kind of out of hand? Again, he can still get it if it is out of hand, but it makes me feel better if the Chiefs can be engaged for 60 minutes. In 3 games with Tua, and without Preston Williams, Devontae Parker has a 24% target share, which is 8 targets per game. He gets 3.3 high leverage looks per game. He had multiple goal line fades last week. Mike Gesicki's at a 21% target share with a 10.3 yard average depth of target, getting 2 downfield targets per game. Jakeem Grant has 17% of targets, so it's been kind of concentrated. And then on the ground, we have Myles Gaskin. Ran 45% of the routes last week, 71% of the snaps, 21 carries, 2 targets. The Chiefs don't really care about stopping the run, so I think Gaskin is very interesting this week. So I don't know if I'm quite there with Devontae Parker because it is a tougher individual matchup, but I think there's enough reason here to believe that the Dolphins, like you said, can keep this game close and can make us feel really good about the Chiefs. So what are you seeing here with Miami? Anything jump out to you?
Yeah, so I think I've been talking to you about this a lot, but I've been tinkering with like expected spreads for games. And if I look at the expected spread for this game, I know that like the actual spread is a lot closer. It's the exact same almost for Green Bay and Kansas City. The expected spread for this game is a lot closer than it recommends betting the Packers, but then recommends betting the Dolphins to cover. So that's why I think if I have like a tournament lineup, like a single entry tournament lineup, I am more likely to stack the Chiefs than to stack the Packers because I expect this game to be close. And like Gaskin's the easiest run back of all time. I have no concerns about him. I think, like you said, the Chiefs actively encourage you to run against them because they're a very smart defense. And like they know that rushing is less efficient than passing. So like they actively encourage you to run, which does drain clock, but like doesn't matter, honestly. So I would say Gaskin's the number 1 bring back, probably Gesicki too. I've been wary of Gesicki for a while, but that chemistry last week was good. He gets high leverage targets. He has upside, which not a lot of tight ends do. I think that Devontae Parker is still good as a bring back. I think that your concerns around the defense are justified, but like Devontae Parker is a good player. We saw Tua get more aggressive in throwing to him last week, which I liked because like he had a quote that was literally like, if they're open, I'll throw it to him. And like, that's not really Devontae Parker's game. But then last week he did throw it to him in a tough individual matchup for Parker in that game. So
Yeah.
I would say I would rank them Gaskin, Gesicki, Parker, but I'm very okay with any of them personally.
Yeah, that's where I am. Again, I saw Parker get some goal line fades last week. It's just a tough like individual matchup for him, and I want to make sure that I don't get overexposed because he could put up like an 8-point game, which is gonna probably crush a lot of any upside that we get from the Chiefs unless we hit everywhere else. But I'm gonna keep my exposure, my expectations in check for Devontae Parker, but Gaskin, Gesicki, Parker, all very much in play for me. So I feel good about this team. I've seen enough from Tua. Yeah, it could get bad based on like what we've seen in his 2 worst games, but other than that, he's been really efficient. So I think that the story of a league average quarterback through his starts is very misleading overall.
The route to get there is adventurous. All right, rank the game stacks for me, including like you don't need to stick to just the ones we discussed, but like I think those are the main ones this week. I think Titans Jags is like in that discussion as well. But if you had to rank like for a single entry tournament lineup, how would you rank the game stacks?
You're probably gonna hate me because I think right now we're leaning between like the Green Bay game and the Chiefs game. But in terms of overall stackability, I might go Falcons Chargers number 1. Okay. I feel like I said if that game goes off, these teams have some of the most concentrated target trees that there are. We know Justin Herbert has upside, so I might put that number 1. If not, it would be the Chiefs because then I can run it back with Myles Gaskin. I'm more nervous about the Lions, even though I like them and I'm not like concerned. It's more the individual matchup for Marvin Jones. TJ Hawkinson should be fine, but other than that, I don't necessarily know where to go if DeAndre Swift doesn't play. So like I have fewer options in that game. And also for the Packers, I mean, it's kind of just Devontae and Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Jones, I know, but like there's
Bobby
not really
Tons. Bobby Tons, man. Why you hating on my boy?
Look, they're tight ends finally okay for once, but I don't want to be like I'm just gonna play Tunyon and like Hawkinson and then not play Kelsey.
Okay, so you mentioned league average for passing net expected points per dropback is like 0.14. If you take sacks out, that's probably closer to like 0.25 if I had to guesstimate.
Like that. I used to do that, but I don't remember.
I'll do it at the end of the year, but like 0.25 per attempt is like league average. Aaron Rodgers is at 0.91 when targeting big shot Bob Tunyon.
There we go.
Like no other quarterback is above, or no other tight end is above 0.67, which is George Kittle. So like big shot Bob Tunyon is the man. And I don't think he's a priority at tight end because his volume is not good, but he can beast out on low volume. So I think that to me, I'm ranking these stacks. If I have a single entry tournament lineup, Chiefs 1, Chiefs Dolphins 1, it's so easy to stack, and the upside there is tremendous. I would say Packers Lions is 2. Feel good about that one. I'm going to put Titans Jags 3 because I think that you know where you're going. There you go. You can go Tannehill, Henry, Corey Davis, AJ Brown, DJ Chark, like James Robinson. Like that's a very easy game to stack. And I'll put Falcons Chargers 4.
I'd have a hard time going Jaguars Titans over Chargers Falcons.
I don't think that's indefensible by any means, but personally I would.
Divisional game. I know that there are the comparisons between Mike Glennon and Matt Ryan from like a film standpoint.
Yeah,
but
Robert Mays tweeted out like an actual video of it, and it's frightening. It's rattled my brain.
I don't know. I would have a hard time. I think the game's number 4 for me, but
okay,
I like Chargers Falcons more.
So we just have those two effectively like not flipped. So like
you have one option for the 2 if you played like James Robinson's obviously fine, but
yeah, it's 2 good options. Chark's an awesome option at his salary, and so is Robinson.
Yeah, but I would rather. I know the salaries aren't the same, but Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones is a little different than DJ Chark with Mike Glennon.
I think you're underestimating Mike Glennon. What could go wrong? I have to use Mike Glennon in the Scott Fish Bowl this week for the playoffs.
I got bounced because I had to use Colt McCoy last week because I built around the Buccaneers. My Brady Gronk stack was on bye, so I had no shot.
Yeah, we'll see how this goes. But maybe I'm just overconfident in Mike Glennon. But what could go wrong in being overconfident in Mike Glennon? Speaking of Titans Jaguars, let's finish up here with my second trend. And one of the big decisions on this slate is how you rank the stud running backs. You got Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey, banged up now, and Derrick Henry all ready to fire here. And then Aaron Jones is facing a team that he torched for 236 yards and 3 touchdowns back in week 2. So I want to run through these guys and try to rank them here. So if we look at each guy's adjusted opportunities in their most relevant sample, there are pretty clear workload tiers here. McCaffrey and Dalvin are in tier 1. Then Derrick Henry is by himself in tier 2. And then Aaron Jones is in the third tier. If you look at Jones and Henry, they both have plus matchups and similar game environments. So I am going to lock in Henry above Jones. That's the first thing I'll do in the rankings here. Put Henry above Jones. And I think the workload gap between Jones and the top 2 guys is also big enough where I'll put him 4th. Like that will put him below him. Like his upside is huge. And I'm not saying don't use Aaron Jones, but I need to rank the studs this week. And I think he's probably going to be number 4 for me. So then it's between Cook, McCaffrey, and Henry. The matchup favors Henry by a pretty wide margin. If you look at adjusted opportunities against the Jaguars this year by running backs, they've been worth 0.63 FanDuel points each average adjusted opportunity. It's compared to 0.57 against the Broncos, which is McCaffrey, and 0.53 against the Bucs, which is Dalvin Cook. And that means if Henry is within about 4 or 5 adjusted opportunities of Dalvin Cook, he'd likely have the better overall outlook. Henry's adjusted opportunities per game in his most relevant sample are about 4 lower than Dalvin's. So I think this is enough for me to put Henry above Dalvin and just take the path of least resistance, take advantage of the matchup, and go Derrick Henry number 1. I'll also put Henry above McCaffrey, even though McCaffrey has the best workload and a better matchup than Dalvin. And the reason there is motivation, you tack on this thigh injury, I think that helps a lot too. The Panthers are not going to the playoffs. But both the Vikings and the Titans currently are in the top 7 seeds in their respective conference. McCaffrey has now gotten hurt a 3rd time this year. There's at least a chance that they scale him back with, down the stretch. And I don't think that's as possible with Henry or Cook. So once we consider all things, this is how I'm going to rank these guys. And I want you to do the same thing because why not? Henry is first. I think that he is the best combination of situation and workload. I will go Dalvin Cook second. Both Alvin Kamara and Christian McCaffrey had 20 FanDuel points against the Bucs, and the workload for Cook is on par with or better than those guys. I also think that game will be close, which helps a lot. I will still put McCaffrey third due to the workload here. It depends on the thigh injury as we get more information, but I think that as of Wednesday, I feel okay putting him third above Aaron Jones and then Jones 4th. I want exposure to all of them, though, because they all could conceivably be the highest scoring guy in this slate. So, Brandon, how are you ranking these 4 running backs? And are you going to try to get exposure to all of them, or are you lopping some out of your player pool?
I would be, and this is scary because it always is, but I would be most inclined to lop off Aaron Jones.
I mean, he's 4th, so technically I would be too, but
it was 4th for you. You don't necessarily know that for me.
True.
But his workload's not quite on par with these other guys in games that he shared with Devontae Adams. So I would be nervous about that. I will say I understand the sentiment that the Panthers are not relevant right now, but they were 3-5 whenever he returned in week 9, which is not out of contention by any means, but kind of a long shot. And he got 11 targets and 18 rushes. So in that game against the Chiefs, I would put a healthy Christian McCaffrey number 1. I think that we've been searching for the new Christian McCaffrey all season, and there really is no replacement for Christian McCaffrey aside from a healthy Christian McCaffrey. So if he is a full go, he's my number 1. I would put Derrick Henry number 2 just because the matchup is so much better. But we did see last week that if things get weird, he does have his flaws. Yeah. And based on matchup alone, I don't factor in matchup nearly as much as I used to, but the Buccaneers are such a tough, they're an outlier. That's how good they are with their rush defense. So I would be third on Dalvin Cook. But if McCaffrey doesn't play, I'm fine with any of the 3 behind him. But again, I think Aaron Jones is the odd man out based on his workload.
Do you think you will have Jones, or like realistically? I know it's tough to project out on.
Yeah. I mean, look, like I said, if I'm being realistic at this point, I will probably only play like 8 7 running backs, maybe, like not that many.
Yeah.
He'll be one of them because he's one of the few who can really torch me.
Yeah.
And I've learned my lesson by full fading Derrick Henry against the Texans, which worked out for 3 quarters, but not for the 4th quarter and overtime. I full faded Darren Waller last week because I didn't think that the upside was there. I have to learn from this. Aaron Jones has that ability to burn me. That doesn't say like play everybody, because that's not the same thing. Not everybody can put up those big games, but Aaron Jones is one of them. For example, Alvin Kamara is not one of those guys right now. So like, I'm not saying play everybody. It's Aaron Jones in this game can make me regret not using him. I don't really see that with like an Alvin Kamara or an Ezekiel Elliott. So that's the distinction, and I want to make that clear.
Yeah, I think that we had a question about this in the snake draft last Friday from Bethany Peters. She asked, what do we mean when we say, can this person burn me? Is it a regret thing? No, it's about ceiling. It's like, it's a proxy for ceiling. And Aaron Jones, if we're talking 95th percentile or 90th percentile outcomes, which happens 1 out of every 10 times inherently, like his 90th percentile outcome is as good as most people on this slate. Therefore, it justifies having exposure to him. So, like, again, the question, and I've said this a lot this year, but like, what are the odds not using this person burns me? I think with Aaron Jones, probably 15%. So I want to get to like 15% or so. Is that fair?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's about right.
Okay.
I do think you need to take a stand and be a little bolder on one of the 3, maybe.
I think for me, that'll be Henry. Like,
I think
Henry realistically is going to top out at like, given last week, I think he'll top out at max, like upside 30% rostered. I will be above that heavily.
I think it helps that there are a lot of running backs and there are a lot of receivers. There are a lot of quarterbacks worth salaries. So that will keep his roster rate in check. But according to FanShareSports.com, he is tied for 3rd right now in tags overall. Second. What?
Behind whom?
Justin Herbert, surprisingly.
Okay.
And Myles Gaskin.
Okay.
It's early still, but I would imagine of the three studs that Henry is easily the most popular.
I agree by a pretty wide margin, but I think that's justified.
Sure.
I will say that, like, I'm saying that I'll be overweight on Henry. I'll also simultaneously be overweight on Dalvin Cook. Like, I think if we're talking like percentage-wise, I will be most heavily overweight on Dalvin Cook relative to the field.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You'll play like, I know how you build. So
realistically, I could get to 50% with Dalvin Cook, and I feel deep in saying that.
In the worst rushing running back matchup possible. Yeah.
I like to keep things tight at running back, man. It burned me last week, but what could go wrong with running it back one more time?
Toit and smart.
Exactly. The tweetest of nups. Let's move now to bookmaker information in just 1 second. But first, every football fan dreams of meeting the greatest NFL players of all time. And starting this week, FanDuel and Goat Fuel have teamed up to make those dreams a reality. Goat, G-O-A-T, Fuel. In FanDuel's Goat Gauntlet series, powered by Goat Fuel, fans will put their fantasy knowledge to the test by competing for a chance to take on the NFL's greatest of all time. Here's how it works. Over the course of the next 3 weeks, there will be 3 qualifier contests highlighting a specific position, wide receiver, running back, or quarterback, and an NFL GOAT. Those who win the qualifier contest or roster the highest scoring player for that week's highlighted position will automatically be entered into the finals, where they'll have their chance to play against 3 NFL GOATs, Jerry Rice, Emmitt Smith, and Warren Moon, and compete to win their share of $10,000 in cash prizes, Goat Fuel products, and then exclusive virtual meet and greets with the Hall of Famers. For more details, visit FanDuel.com/GoatFuel or download the FanDuel app today. Eligibility restrictions apply. I'm now thirsty. Is Goat Fuel a drink? I think it is. Anyway, thirsty, regardless. It sounds like a drink.
Well, I thought Chris Conley would be there. If it's an NFL
He's got time. Bookmaker info. Sorry. For week 14, we'll start here with the teams with the second and third highest implied totals in the slate we have not yet discussed. That's the Titans and the Seahawks. The Titans are on the road against the Jags. They are 7.5-point favorites, and the total in that game is 52.5. The total has come down a point since open, but it's still pretty lofty. We talked about Henry already, but are you on the Titans passing offense here, and which Jags are you running it back with?
Yeah, love the Titans. Tannehill is one of my favorite plays at quarterback. At salary, I think that he's very defensible. I'll talk more about him later. AJ Brown is probably over salaried, but we know that if you're going to talk upside, he has that. But Corey Davis, the salary is appropriate because he's kind of their wide receiver one at this point in time. Over their most relevant sample. So I really like this passing offense. Obviously, Derrick Henry is in conversation for the RB1. And then I think the bringbacks are very limited, but it's DJ Chark and possibly James Robinson. But I don't know if I'll really play a whole lot of James Robinson this week.
I think I'll play him in game stacks. I'm okay not getting there as a standalone. Like, he's so good, but
yeah.
When I have other options on better offenses, it's really hard. Like, he pays off despite his offense. This is not like and
he's only 2,200 less than Dalvin Cook.
Get out of here. Is this because of the Conley snipe? As a standalone play, it's hard for me to get to Robinson over Austin Eckler. I think that's the distinction that I have here. So I agree that as a standalone play, probably not going to get there. But I think the other thing too is this passing offense is good. And I think that the same discussion we had last week is in play once again this week, where we said, if you want to be, have a different roster construction than other people, you use the Titans passing game and then use Dalvin Cook. That exact same dilemma or exact same combination is in play this week. You use Ryan Tannehill, Corey Davis, Dalvin Cook, and you deviate from Derrick Henry. I wish I'd done that more last week than I did, because I would have had a better week than I did. I think that stack is very viable. So I agree that Tannehill's an option. As I said, I think he's probably fourth right now above Justin Herbert, but it's by a very tiny bit. I think they're in the same tier for me. I think that Tannehill's a good play once again. Is Chark a standalone play for you? Because I think he is for me.
Yeah, I think so. There were problematic target numbers for him last week with 7. He did lead the team, but 5 of those were downfield. I think he's actually one of my player picks. So I shouldn't give out everything, but
yeah, but he can.
I like him.
He has upside, and that's what we need. The Seahawks also have a 30-point total for their game against the Jets. They are 13.5-point favorites, but only 31% of the money is on the over, and the total has come down a point since open. There are now concerns with the Jets keeping pace, especially if Denzel Mims has to sit. So how are we feeling about the Seahawks offense here?
Not too great necessarily. We just know that they've been slowing it down. The pass rate's down. And that is problematic. Now it is scary just to say I might not have any exposure to them, but they are over the past 3 weeks 30th in pace. And once you adjust for game situation, I was trying to see they are now 17th in pass rate. So I think that tells me enough. The odds that these guys burn us is so much lower now. And in my regression candidate piece this week, I kind of looked at Russell Wilson a little bit more in depth. His touchdown rate is it's still coming back down, and it needed to from where he was early. So I kind of don't feel like I have to play them, as scary as it is.
If I'm looking at projected offensive efficiency, they're third for me behind Green Bay and Tennessee. I know Tennessee being second is probably kind of wild, but they're facing the Jags. So my numbers like Tennessee a lot in general. They're pretty high in the power rankings too, which is kind of scary, but whatever.
Tannehill's good.
Yeah, he is. I agree. If you told me I'd say that a year ago, I would have hit you in the face. But we're here now. I think that this is the way that I'll play things. If I have. Let's say I have a 20 max tournament, I'm probably not going to use Russ at all. And I'm fine with that. But if I am doing a larger field tournament, I allocate X lineups to be Russ and DK Metcalf stacks. I think you kind of need to. It's kind of similar to the Chiefs game against the Jets, except the Chiefs actually like throwing. and are playing well.
So it's not.
So it wouldn't be.
It's exactly the same.
It wouldn't be as many, but like I think that you take the same mindset because like it just has to be a pretty large field tournament for me to get there. Like in a 20 max tournament, I'm okay not getting there because I just want to focus on the other quarterbacks so much.
Yeah, and I understand where you're coming from. I think those are the types of stacks where personally I need to start weeding out because
that's fine.
If I'm bogging
probably
down,
better process. Yeah.
Like, and again, I'm just trying to get a little riskier because it is hard to like hit the right core. So you don't want like the best lineup, but with the wrong stack. So like, just again, if you're playing like you said, 20 lineups, I don't think Russ is really in the conversation.
Which is weird. It's weird. Chris Carson, yay or nay?
No.
Yeah. If you look at the games he's played with Carlos Hyde, if you exclude week 12, he's at 90 yards per game, 22 adjusted opportunities, 32% red zone share. That's okay if he were like lower salaried, but he's not. So I think that's my concern. I think the odds he gets 20 points are decent, but the odds he gets 25 to 30 are not that high. So
has he ever gotten to 30 in a game? That's what I hate. I didn't like using him last year.
Yeah.
Because he'll get you like 18 to 20 frequently, but like never a whole lot more than that.
So we're going to be low on the Seahawks against the Jets. What could go wrong? I will be lower on them if Denzel Mims can't play too. Two other games have totals in the 50s. The first one is Tampa Bay against the Bucks, and Tampa Bay. It's in Tampa Bay between the Bucks and Vikings. Whatever. Gosh. That one's at 51.5 with the Bucks favored by 6.5. I definitely think the Vikings can cover that number. So I think this game is potentially more stackable than it seems. I would also say when we were ranking game stacks, I should have included this in that discussion. I think this is a great game to stack. I think it is going to be one of the more underrated game stacks. I was looking at RotoGrinders projected roster rates. Obviously it's early, but the numbers I saw by Tom Brady and Mike Evans literally startled me. So I think this is in discussion. Tom Brady is in discussion for a single entry quarterback lineup. I think that Mike Evans would be the guy I'd stack him with. He now has a hamstring injury. He was limited on Wednesday, which is kind of concerning, but like if that doesn't wind up being a thing, if he gets into full practice by Friday, I feel like the Buccaneers and Vikings game has the potential to be really, really fun. Where do you sit on this game?
I like the game. This was a hard one for me to break down because the Buccaneers are a little too wide open for me. Yes, Mike Evans would be the preference, but that's not to say that he's locked in as like the number one. That's why if I compare this to, say, the Falcons-Chargers game, I kind of know better who was going to put up the bigger games. The Buccaneers have too many guys who can put up a big game. Like Rob Gronkowski is involved now. He's getting yardage. So that's my biggest concern. And then I just had a flashback to this because we were talking last week about the Raiders playing a second consecutive East Coast game. They had to travel back and then go back. And I was like, things like that I don't put a whole lot of stock into. But I also don't even really look at like teams coming off of buys. But Tampa Bay's coming off a bye. That is a little scary. They might have some answers for Minnesota. So that's one of the reasons why I'm a little bit lower. But like you, I like the game a lot, and I think it will be a little bit under the radar. So I'm going to stack it for sure. I'm probably just going to stack like the top 5 or 6 games and not mess around with like a Washington San Francisco game or anything. Because I think they're just games you can cut off for the most part. So yes, it's a 13 game slate, but it's probably closer to like a 6 or 7 game slate if we're being realistic.
I think so too. I will say with Mike Evans, again, assuming that the hamstring injury doesn't wind up being anything major, he has in the past 3 games 11, 9, and 9 overall targets. He has 3, 2, and 4 deep targets, and he has 5, 3, and 1 red zone targets. And you're getting that for $7,300, I think.
I'm not this guy, but how many downfield targets has he caught?
Well, I mean, like, does it matter?
Like,
he's not Darnell Mooney. It's not like Mike Evans is incapable
but Tom Brady hasn't been completing deep passes. That's a big
No, that's a stupid narrative. They cut off the thing at 20 air yards and like just to make it. I got really annoyed at that stat because they had that stat about he went over 20 yards in the past blah 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 weeks. Then he completed like 5 in that game. And he had a bunch of completions between 10 and 19 air yards. Like, it was stupid. Anyway, I'm running this now. I'm looking this up because I'm annoyed. Okay, so in that time, Mike Evans has 3 receptions on deep balls for 72 yards and a tud.
Nice.
We know he has the touchdowns too. So I think that the Bucs are a good stack.
Yes.
Fight me.
I mean, I will, but not for that reason.
Is it still the Chris Conley thing?
No, I love Mike Evans. I just
Okay.
We've been doing this for 5 years. There's a lot. You're wearing jeans right now.
I am wearing and slippers.
And a sweater.
And slippers. Anything else in this game? Ranking. How are we feeling about the Vikings as far as a bring back option?
Like I said, it's really hard to nitpick Dalvin Cook, but it is the worst matchup basically from a rushing standpoint. We know he can get targets. We know he can be involved. So I'm not going to talk myself out of Dalvin Cook. My question for you is Thielen or Jefferson. If you're stacking this because you said you might play Tom Brady, in a single entry stack.
Well, I'd probably use Dalvin first, but I think outside of that, I think I would go. Actually, okay. So before the show, we were talking about this, and I said Thielen.
Yeah,
I am going to change my tune just because, like, I want yardage because yardage is how you get upside. Because if you run into a touchdown, you're gonna do really well. I feel really good about Justin Jefferson's yardage, so I actually feel like I'm going to change my tune and go Justin Jefferson over Adam Thielen. That could be very stupid. I like both a lot, though.
No, I don't think it's stupid. I would probably agree with you. Adam Thielen has amazing red zone usage, but he just has way too many touchdowns for where he should be, and eventually he's not going to score as many touchdowns.
Yeah,
unless he just runs hot all year, which is possible. But according to regression, he should get back in check. It's
a tough matchup for the Vikings for sure, but like Kirk Cousins has been legit good this year, 8th in schedule adjusted passing offense of the Vikings. He's been really good in like negative game script, weirdly, which is not what I would have expected. He's at 0.57 passing net expected points per dropback when they're trailing by a touchdown or more in the second half. So like, I think there's potential for them to be competitive even if they have a bad first half. And I think that's attractive to me. So I think this is a great game. And I want to stack it for sure. The other 50-point total game is between the Raiders and the Colts in Las Vegas. It opened at 52, but it's come down half a point. But now 71% of the money is on the over here. So the total is good. And that's probably the one appealing thing about this game. The Colts defense is good too. The Colts offense has market share issues. So how do you feel about this game, which does have a high total?
Yeah, I mean, the Colts always have a high total, it seems like, because they're an efficient offense, but doesn't necessarily lead to there's a difference between scoring points and having big fantasy outings as a result. This team doesn't really have those because they spread the ball out. If I had to play one Colt, it would be Jonathan Taylor. If I had to play a Raider, it would probably I don't want to speak ill of Darren Waller second week, but it would probably be Nelson Aguilar.
Agreed.
He had 6 downfield targets last week, didn't catch any. His role is still really good for this team. Darren Waller's not going to have quite as big a game as he had last week. I think it'll be more popular than he deserves to be because people do like to chase the points. I won't sit here and say that I won't play Darren Waller because I have to, or else I will.
I don't know if you have to have a spot. I will say that.
Well,
I know that could go very well.
I need at least one share of Darren Waller this week, but I just don't have a whole lot of interest in this game overall.
I don't really either. I think that Taylor is the obvious one. I think that like a mini stack with Taylor and Aguilar works, but like it's a 0 quarterback game for me.
Yeah.
I don't really want to use Henry Ruggs. Michael Pittman's fine. T.Y. Hilton's fine, but like the odds that I get to them are not that high, honestly.
Yeah, those are the kinds of plays I need to cut out.
Yeah. So it looks appealing at first glance, but limited player exposure in this game, I think, is the right way to go. Weather for this week, there is some wind in the forecast for Bears, Texans, and Chicago. Currently 12 miles per hour, which is not a big concern. There is some rain possible in New Jersey for the Giants and the Cardinals. Doesn't look too bad, though, and there's not much wind. Finally, there is also rain possible in Seattle for the Seahawks and Jets, as if the Seahawks needed another reason to run the football. Wind speeds are projected at 6 miles per hour there. I feel no real need to change things based on weather for this week. So let's dive into our position-by-position plays for week number 14 on the main slate. Brandon, who stands out to you at quarterback?
If I had to pick just overall, it would be, I think, Mahomes number 1, Rodgers number 2.
Okay.
But I'm not going to play those guys in every lineup. And another player or two I like here, Justin Herbert. 8,300. I know the salary is a little weird, but it's a bounce back spot after the worst possible outing last week. I think people will not really want to play Justin Herbert, and I like this game a lot. We need upside. So the very low salaried guys are not appealing to me, but Justin Herbert has upside. He rarely gets to face bottom 10 pass defenses. Atlanta's 26th in 3 games against them. I've already said this, but 29.9 FanDuel points per game, 346 passing yards, 0.37 passing net expected points per dropback. Patrick Mahomes leads the league with 0.40. So I'm not saying Herbert is Mahomes, but like when you adjust for this, we're getting very likely a very efficient quarterback with some upside. My second love is Ryan Tannehill at 7,900. It is a rematch of a week 2 game, but that was a while ago. The Jaguars are 23rd against the pass this season. Tannehill has played 5 games against bottom half pass defenses. He's averaged 27 FanDuel points per game, 284 passing yards with 3.4 passing touchdowns. He's at 0.43 passing net expected points per dropback in those matchups. Again, Mahomes 0.40. Very weirdly, the Jaguars have held only 2 opponents to subpar passing net expected points per dropback in a single game. One was Aaron Rodgers at 0.11. That game was very windy. And then Kirk Cousins at 0.07, which is not even a terrible game necessarily. They got out ahead on the Vikings. That was like a really strange game, but they both went for 300 yards. So I really like Ryan Tannehill this week.
I like Tannehill too. If you had to pick between one of those guys, who would you pick?
Between Tannehill and Herbert?
Yeah.
I'd lean Tannehill.
I'm leaning there too. But like I said, they're right there together for me. So my first love is Patrick Mahomes. Going out on a limb here. We're back to the situation again where you need to have your quarterback capable of scoring 30-plus points. I think that Herbert and Tannehill can. So I'm not saying that, but that's like my mindset here. And Rodgers can do that, obviously. But like this is a good Mahomes spot. I have faith in the Dolphins putting up some points and keeping this one relatively close. And yeah, it's a tough matchup. And I respect the Dolphins defense a lot. I love the Dolphins defense. But I don't care about that with Patrick Mahomes. He had a 40-point game against the freaking Ravens. He dropped 31 on the Bucs, and both those are top 10 teams. So I think Mahomes, I don't think this will happen, but I pray people will lower him because of the matchup. I don't think it'll happen. I want to be abundantly clear about that, but I pray they do because it's an amazing spot.
Well, I mean, all quarterbacks are kind of max out at like 15% in roster rate. So
yeah. He'll be close there, but I'm going to use him regardless.
Right. But
I have a better advantage if he's 8% as opposed to 13%.
I think that'll be more accurate. It's not like he's not going to be the most popular quarterback.
No, I don't think so either. I think that'd probably be Rodgers, right?
Possibly. Yeah. I mean, there's still like I don't know. We're not talking about Deshaun, but like,
it is a Deshaun revenge game because the Bears did not draft him. Don't forget
people like to play Deshaun.
Yeah. So I think Mahomes is a great player regardless, but I hope people lower him because of the matchup. Again, I respect the Dolphins defense. Think they're amazing, but also don't care. My second love is Tom Brady. I think the Vikings can keep this game close, which puts Brady in position for a ceiling game. He's actually top 30 points 3 times this year. Rodgers has done it once. So Brady weirdly has upside. The Vikings rank 15th against the pass, which is not bad, but it's also not prohibitive. They've been a lot better recently, but they have faced 3 backups or since benched players, a.k.a. Nick Foles, in their past 4 games. They got just 1/2 against Matthew Stafford before that. So I think if we're looking at guys below $8,000, I think that Brady has the highest ceiling, which is why I put him above Tannehill. But I think that Tannehill's really respectable 4th behind Tom Brady. Let's move to running back. What do you have there?
I'm going to start with Christian McCaffrey. I said this before, and I think that if we get a healthy McCaffrey, he's the best running back of the 3. That could, again, because I would project him for his full workload. I don't think that it matters that they're not that relevant. That's just my view on this. In his 3 games this year, he's averaged 33 adjusted opportunities per game, which if we haven't actually said what that is yet, it's carries plus 2x targets, because a target for running back is worth about twice as many expected fantasy points as a carry. So 33 of those to lead the league, 124 yards per game, 27.4 FanDuel points per game, 35 and a half adjusted opportunities just in the 2 games that he finished. So he's really elite, and I nobody is really Christian McCaffrey. Dalvin's close, but he's not quite there for me. Dalvin's also in a very tough matchup. So I would, again, put McCaffrey number 1 if he does not play or he's projected to be limited. I'll just pivot to Dalvin Cook or Derrick Henry here. But
I would also say projected to be limited does not include a certain national reporter saying that he'll switch series with Mike Davis. If that happens, you can disregard it. If Adam Schefter says it, you can listen to it. Rant over. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to go with Austin Eckler at 7,500. We haven't people quit using this term, but the Falcons are one of those like funnel defenses. They rank 5th against the rush according to numberFire's schedule adjusted metrics, but they're 26th against the pass. In terms of rushing success rate allowed to running backs, they are 11th. They are 2nd in rushing net expected points per carry allowed. They are 10th in target success rate allowed to running backs, but I dug back through and they faced 6 or more targets from running backs 5 times, weirdly once per week through the first 5 weeks, but didn't really face too many pass catching backs since then. They did play Alvin Kamara twice in this recent sample, but this was with Taysom Hill, and he's on pace for 16 catches this year. Like his 16 game pace would be 16 catches with Taysom Hill. Eckler has a 21% target share in 4 games with Mike Williams. So there's a yardage floor, and he's been below expectation in terms of his fantasy points. He's 2.9 touchdowns from expectation, which is the 5th biggest deviation among running backs. So he should have some touchdown regression. I know roll comes into play, but Austin Eckler can still score touchdowns from outside the 10.
I also would note that like he had a good role in his first game back. They just weren't in the red zone in his second game back. Like he had 36% of the red zone chances in week 12, and he had 2 carries and 2 targets inside the 10 in that game and was like a half yard from scoring. So I agree that the touchdown concerns might be a bit overblown. Like he's going to lose a touchdown to Kalen Ballage on Sunday, guaranteed. I'm telling you that now, but I don't care. Let's still score.
My third love is David Montgomery at 6,600. Since returning, he has 24 adjusted opportunities per game with 127 scrimmage yards in those 2. So that's pretty strong number. He's played 85 and 75% of the snaps and ran 74 and 81% of the pass routes, which is new usage for David Montgomery. Over the past 2 weeks with Trubisky back under center, they are at 27 seconds per play since the bye, 65% pass rate. Those would rank 3rd and 1st on the full season. You want rushes for your quarter or for your running backs, yes, but he has 10 targets over the past 2 games. That's equivalent to 20 carries. So I like David Montgomery quite a bit this week.
Montgomery or Gaskin?
Gaskin, but I just realized I have 3 Bears in my loves, so I think I'm higher on them than I should be. But I mean,
that's justified.
They play the Texans.
Yeah, justified.
It's kind of a fun game.
I think that Montgomery is a tiny smidge above Gaskin, but if I need the $600, I'm okay going Gaskin higher. Like I think it's very comparable. I will also have both in some lineups just because the high-salaried, mid-salaried receivers are so good. My first love is Derrick Henry because he's my favorite among the studs. He is favored in this game, but it's not projected to be a blowout necessarily. He's had 27.1 adjusted opportunities per game for the full season, 118.3 yards per game, 39% of the red zone work, and the Jags are very beatable on the ground. So I just think that Derrick Henry is number 1. I don't disagree with your thoughts on Christian McCaffrey. And again, I will be like, from a percentage perspective, probably most overweight on Dalvin Cook, but like straight up, give me Derrick Henry. My second love is Jonathan Taylor. I much prefer Austin Eckler, but you had taken him already. I also think that James Robinson is worth his salary as always, but Taylor has been getting more effective recently, and that might eventually matter because he has more than 110 yards from scrimmage in 2 straight games. He actually has double-digit FanDuel points in 7 out of 11 games this year, and his role has been better recently. Las Vegas is 27th in success rate allowed to running backs. I think that Taylor's floor is better than perception, and he has a path to a really nice ceiling. So again, give me Austin Eckler, but Taylor's Worth looking at what?
I would like them more if their goal line back was not Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah. Yeah. My third love is Myles Gaskin. I think he's a tiny bit less appealing than Montgomery. He's facing the Chiefs. And again, they actively encourage you to run the ball on them. They rank 23rd in success rate allowed to opposing backs. And Gaskin has 38% of the team's red zone chances in his healthy games this year. That actually includes the time when Jordan Howard's on the team. So it's probably better since Howard's been inactive/cut. Should probably look at that, but I haven't. Whatever. He's averaging 91 yards per game. He's got a good floor, access to a good ceiling. So I think Gaskin at 6,000 is a tremendous play once again. Like I said, I will have him and Montgomery in the same lineup together often enough to get in those high salary receivers. Speaking of receivers, Brandon, let's move there. Who do you have for this week?
Love the top two with Devontae and Tyreek Hill, but I think that we get some savings with Julio Jones at 7,600. It's a nice salary for him. I do view him in like the second or third tier. Be third if you consider Devontae and Tyreek in their own tier, but salary is really nice for what I view as a really good game environment. The Chargers do have capable cornerbacks, but they're 20th against the pass overall this season when adjusted for opponent. They're much better on a success rate basis than a passing net expected points per play basis. So just means that bigger plays are capable, and we know that Julio Jones has those in him still. He has just a 21% target share in 5 games with Calvin Ridley, but that's 9 targets per game in a high-volume offense, 2.6 downfield targets per game, 1.4 red zone targets per game. That works out to about 11.8 weighted targets per game, so really good role for him. My second love is I almost always go in the 6,000 range here, but I do not like it that much. If I had to pick one, it would be Devontae Parker. But it's going to be Allen Robinson at 7,000. I think 2 mid-range receivers is much more appealing to me this week than it typically is. But the Bears are first in the season in 20 to 80% pre-snap win probability pass rate. They're trending up in pace the past 2 games since their bye with Trubisky back under center. That's led to good things for Allen Robinson. He has 25% of the targets in those past 2 games, which is 10 per game, with 4 combined downfield and red zone targets per game. The efficiency is just average, but the volume gets him there. It's about 12.6 weighted targets per game, so better than Julio and his relevant sample. And Houston, 32nd in target success rate allowed to receivers at 63.1%. The 31st ranked team is at 60%. This is not a game that we really talked about, but I do like the Bears offense kind of a lot. And I think that most people will just go with Montgomery, but Allen Robinson definitely has a path to a ceiling based on volume. My third love is DJ Chark at 5,900. Had just 2 catches for 41 yards last week, but had a team high 7 targets. That was 17%, which is not ideal, but it's a really good salary. And 5 of his 7 targets were downfield. So if you give some proper weight to those, he was at about 11 targets worth of, I guess, targets instead of just the 7. So it looks a lot better when you adjust for that. Had 132 air yards overall, which was 8th most among receivers last week. And he's a good receiver.
He is. I think that DJ Chark is the best receiver below 6,000. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would say fairly comfortably.
Okay, I agree. My first love is Tyreek Hill. I think that both Tyreek and Devontae are worth prioritizing, even with the fun stud backs in the slate. And I think that they are in a tier of their own if we're doing tier stuff. I would just assume more people would take the soft matchup for Devontae, but Tyreek might be matchup proof. He has double-digit targets in 4 straight games and 5 of the past 6. He has 6 deep targets in 2 separate games in that span, which is disgusting. And I think that having him and Devontae here is going to increase my exposure to guys like David Montgomery and Myles Gaskin. It's worth that because I think that they're fine plays. But I think that we need to start viewing Hill and Adams like running backs. Like Michael Thomas was a running back last year too. This is a very stupid way to phrase this, but they were running backs from an expected range of outcomes perspective. Hill and Adams are both that, so I want to make sure I get a healthy heaping of both this week. My second love is we're going to jump all the way down to Kiki Cutie. I was skeptical of him entering last week because just generally skeptical of inactive players a lot of the time, but he proved me wrong. He played well. He had 9 total targets, 4 deep and 1 in the red zone. He actually has 5 red zone targets the past 3 games. He's still just $5,600, so I don't think that accurately reflects the role he has now. It's not a great game, but I think that Cutie Montgomery or Cutie Cole Kmet, Cutie Allen Robinson stacks, those are all very viable. And also Brandon Cooks could work as well. My third love is Nelson Aguilar. He didn't pay off last week, but it wasn't because of volume. He had 11 total targets. 6 of those were deep. And in 7 games since their bye, he has 21% of the overall targets, 37% of the deep targets, and 29% in the red zone. So eventually he's going to hit, I hope. And I want to be in on him when he does, because he's $5,200. So I think Aguilar works. I prefer Chark and I prefer Cutie, but Aguilar, one more time, what could possibly go wrong? Let's move to tight end, Brandon. What do you have there?
So I didn't do this, as I said I would before the podcast, but I have Travis Kelce because I think at 8,200, you can just view him with a DJ Chark, for example, or an $8,200 receiver with a 59 or 5,000 wherever tight end, and I'm gonna.
You take Kelce in that situation, yes.
Yeah, that's kind of where I've been, because I'll list out some stuff, but it's pretty wild. Now, I said at the top of the show that I think Kelce could get lost in the shuffle because of a few things. One, we have multiple stud running backs, at least 3. Even if McCaffrey were not to play, there's at least 2. We have stud receivers, lots of them, specifically Hill and Devontae. And then 3, Darren Waller is back on the slate after his historic game last week. But we talk opportunity cost with like the running backs and even the quarterbacks. Like, we need upside that some of these other lower salaried guys can't get. There's opportunity cost with Travis Kelce, I think more so than with the stud receivers, because we know that a number of receivers can put up huge games. Not a whole lot of tight ends really have that. Kelce has 11 games with at least 50 yards this season. Waller, by comparison, has 5. The next best mark is TJ Hawkinson with 8. Kelce has 8 games with 75 or more yards. Waller is second with 4, so half as many.
Anti-Darren Waller thing.
No, it's a comparison.
Right. Yeah.
But Kelce has 5 100-yard games. Waller and George Kittle have 2. He has 7 games with 15 or more FanDuel points. Nobody else has more than 3. He has 5 games with 20 or more FanDuel points. Nobody else has more than 2. So, like,
the 5 games with 20 is the best argument there, and it's a really good argument.
Again, I didn't think Darren Waller really profiled as somebody who had that in him last week. That was dumb. He might have it again this week, but the matchup's a lot worse. I just think that Travis Kelce has such a better chance to get to 20 FanDuel points than any other tight end really. Probably even has to get to like 15. So if Kelce goes off for like 22 and nobody else kind of projectably gets to like 15, Kelce's a standout play from that regard. My second love, I'm going the whole other end of the spectrum to Cole Kmet at 4,600. So Kelce's hard to get to. I get that, but Kmet in 2 games since their bye for the Bears, he's run 60% of the team's pass routes, played 79% of the snaps. By comparison, Jimmy Graham's at 37%, 42% of the snaps, 37% of the routes. He has just a 13% target share, but had 7 targets last game alone, has a downfield target, 2 red zone targets in the sample. Houston's just 25th against the tight end in terms of target success rate. So I think he's the best sort of, quote unquote punt play at tight end this week.
I would agree. And I think that Cole Kmet is a really fun option because, like, if you're not going to use Kelce, you need to make sure you are getting access to upside elsewhere. And the best way to do so is using Kmet, who is just so cheap. I also think that Evan Engram can have upside. He's my first love at tight end. He gets Daniel Jones back this week, and the usage has been pretty good for an increasing amount of time now. Since Sterling Shepard returned in the games he's played with Daniel Jones, Engram has 24% of the overall targets. He has 32% of the deep targets and 26% in the red zone. That's very different usage than what he had earlier this year. He's only $5,700. It's not a terrible matchup. So I think Engram is definitely worthwhile. I was going to go with Noah Fant as my second tight end, but I'm going to switch gears here and go with Mike Gesicki instead. We saw the 11-target game from him this most recent time, and that was with Tua Tagovailoa. And yeah, the other games with Tua weren't as great, but 5 and 5 targets in those 2 games is at least worthwhile. He's been getting deep targets. He actually has 2 deep targets in every game. Tua has started with no Preston Williams. He gets some red zone looks as well. He has 4 red zone targets the past 3 total games. So the floor is pretty bad for Mike Gesicki, but I like the access he has to a ceiling. So I'll go with Gesicki. Other guys to consider for punting a tight end: Jordan Reed, Logan Thomas, Will Dissly. But I think that Ingram and Gesicki having upside is enough for me, where if I'm not going Komet, I want to get a guy with upside. I think that Gesicki has that, Ingram has that, and of course, Kelsey does as well. Let's finish up here at defense. Defense is actually pretty good this week because we have acceptable low-salaried options. Which one do you like most?
Carolina, 3,400. There are, like you said, lots of options. In their past 2 games, they shut out the Lions, then had 2 touchdowns in Week 12. Drew Lock is at negative 0.09 passing expected points per dropback on the season, has almost a 23% downfield rate, so anything can happen with him. He has at least 1 pick, and each of his past 7 games in multiple picks in 4 of them. They can put up points, sure, but 57% of FanDuel points from defenses come from sacks and interceptions.
Yeah, I think that Carolina is easily number 1. They run this style of defense that encourages shorter throws, but Drew Lock might not be able to recognize that. It might just say F it and chuck it into triple coverage. So Carolina's great. I also think that Dallas is a good pivot. I prefer Carolina, but Dallas is a pretty good consolation prize at $3,500 because sure, Dallas sucks, but they're facing the Bengals. And the conglomerate at quarterback for the Bengals, outside of Joe Burrow, has combined for negative 0.48 passing net expected points per dropback. They have lost an average of half an expected point every time those guys have dropped back this year. The Cowboys suck, but the Bengals suck more. So give me the Cowboys at $3,500. I agree Carolina's great. I also, again, would mention, I think the Saints at $4,900 are worth getting to at times, just because I think things could go off the rails there a little bit. So it's a good week to pay down at defense, but also don't totally overlook the higher salaried options. That is all that we have for today. Brandon, any final thoughts for you before we close up shop?
This is probably maybe the best slate of the year. Lots of good games. So I would say it's gonna, if you're building a lot of lineups like 100, let's say, it's going to be scary not to have exposure to every game, but I think you got to take some stands this week, figure that out. So I'm sure there were things that I said that you disagreed with. So pinpoint those and say this is wrong. And so I'm going to take advantage of people thinking this way.
We say dumb stuff all the time. I'll direct you to our Week 13 preview if you need direct evidence of that. So if you disagree, take your stand, go that way, and see what happens. I'd also say it's a good week to vary roster construction. I like your thought process of having peppering that mid-range at wide receiver. That's viable. I like getting a lot of Hill and Devontae, and I also think there is a case to be made for just still loading up at running back. I think this week it would be probably my least favorite roster construction, but it's one that I will use. So vary your roster construction if you're multi-entering. Think a lot about roster construction. Rank out the studs you like and go from there. That is all the time that we have for today. As always, though, we will be back with you on Monday to recap everything and let you know the big takeaways from a DFS perspective. That is at 9 a.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube page. Make sure you are subscribed there, and also subscribe to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review. Austin Slane is previewing this week's UFC slate. That will be up later, probably tomorrow morning. So make sure you check that out on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gudula13, GDULA13.
You had to think so hard about that.
I thought maybe I threw it in a misdirection.
It threw me off. I use this to sync up our audio, so you just totally messed up my entire process.
Oh man, I'm sorry. Yeah. Do you want me to do it again?
No. I don't. No, just mute yourself. That's the podcast. You deserve to sit in silence. I am at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck with your Week 14 NFL DFS lineups. Do not forget to enter the Listener League. We'll talk to you again on Monday. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire.